Welcome back to What You Need to Know for Audio Engineers. This video we're talking about tracks. So I feel like it's pretty obvious what a track is. It's a pre-recorded instrument that plays along with the band. Tracks don't just come from nothing. They have to come from a source. And that's what this little series has been about so far. It's been about sources. So the source for the tracks is a DAW, or Digital Audio Workstation, DAW. And for us, our DAW that we use is Ableton Live. For us, the way that we usually use tracks is to kind of bolster the sound of a full band that we already have, or to fill in gaps for missing elements of music. If we don't have any texture instruments, let's say we've only got an acoustic guitar, a drummer, and a bass player, but we don't have any electric guitars, we don't have any synths, we don't have any keys, well, then we don't have any texture roles, really. So we might use tracks to cover those texture roles. The digital audio workstation is the source for the tracks, and it's where they all come from. And again, they can be mixed in the DAW, they can be pre-mixed by the supplier, or they can be mixed at the soundboard. How do we get the tracks from the computer, which is where Ableton is a program on a computer. How do we get the tracks from that computer in the digital realm? How do we get those to the soundboard and to come out of the speakers as audio? They go through Dante Virtual Sound Card. So Dante Virtual Sound Card, digital audio network through Ethernet. We talked about this earlier, a couple of videos ago with microphones. But this is how we send the digital audio from our digital audio workstation to the soundboard. We send it digitally via Dante Virtual Sound Card. It's basically just a digital road or a digital vehicle that we can send our tracks along to get where they need to go. And then, the mix rack converts them back from digital into analog audio, and then we can play them back through the speakers. All right, we know that tracks are coming from Ableton via Dante Virtual Sound Card, and they arrive at our mixing desk for us to work with. Now, let's talk about the kinds of instruments and the kinds of tracks that we receive from the DAW. The first kind is the click and the guide tracks. These are two separate tracks. The click is a metronome that counts in time along with the time signature at a certain tempo. Guide is a little voice that says verse, chorus, bridge, breakdown, build. It gives instructions to the band. Click and the guide tracks only come through the band's in-ear monitors, and you don't want to hear them in the main mix. Obviously, hopefully that's obvious. Next, MIDI tracks. So our primary use for MIDI tracks is to automatically change slides for the lyrics in ProPresenter. A MIDI track can be used for any number of things that will communicate through the MIDI language. So a virtual instrument could be triggered by your MIDI tracks, or I think you could even have the lighting system respond via MIDI from Ableton, from cues from Ableton. So it's pretty powerful and pretty expansive, the possible uses for MIDI tracks. That said, the only reason that we use them is for automatically changing slides in ProPresenter. Next, finally, we get to the actual instrument tracks. A lot of times they will be individual instruments, like you'll have guitar 1, guitar 2, guitar 3, guitar 4, guitar 5, guitar 6, if it's a Phil Wickham track, that is. Guitar 7, guitar 8, guitar 9, guitar 10. You have 30 electric guitars in your Phil Wickham song, and they're all individually on their own tracks in your Ableton session. Or, alternatively, you could have a group of tracks that have been mixed down to a single track in the Ableton session. So let's say you have all 30 of those guitars in your Phil Wickham song. You could get them all individually, or you could mix them or have them pre-mixed and mixed down to a single instrument track, and you would call that an electric guitar group. If you like having the extra control, if you like being able to pick and choose, I'll take this guitar but not this one, I'll take this one but not this one. You can delete all of the tracks that you don't want or don't need, and only have the ones that you do want or do need. We're talking about preparing the tracks. We're talking about you want to listen to the tracks before rehearsal, before the band gets there. You have to know what's in the tracks. Who's in the band this week? Do we have a bass player? Do we have a keys player? Do we have a drummer? Do we have an electric guitar player? And what tracks do you have? Do we have tracks that can fill those roles? Yes or no? Do I want to use tracks to fill those roles, or is there somebody else in the band who can switch instruments or switch roles on their own instrument to kind of fill in the gaps? Yes, and the most important part of that is communicate with the band. Let them know. I need you to play this part for this reason. I need you to play this part for this reason. So be able to tell your band members how to play or what to play or what roles they need to fill in the mix. Be aware of problems. There are all kinds of problems that tracks can cause. We can have our MIDI tracks miscommunicating with Pro Presenter and it fires the wrong song and the wrong lyrics are coming up, or no lyrics come up at all. We could have click and guide coming through the main speakers. We could have tracks in the wrong key. I think that happened last week for us. We had tracks in the wrong key. And for me, I was playing electric guitar, and I heard the tracks, and then I heard somebody play a chord, and I was like, okay, either they're playing in the wrong key or the tracks are in the wrong key. So eventually we figured out it was the tracks that were in the wrong key. And that's a problem. You don't want to wait until service to have that realization that, oh, these tracks are in the key of A flat and everybody is playing in the key of A. That's a problem. And you have to be aware of those. You have to listen. You have to use your ears as the audio engineer to listen for those problems, to hear when there's a problem, and to be ready with a solution. So if you have to kill the tracks because they're in the wrong key, or one of those other problems are having, the tracks are misfiring the wrong lyrics, you have to kind of be able to take things away, and you have to be able to run things the old-fashioned way. You have to have your Pro Presenter operator play the right lyrics. You have to have the band play the right notes in the right key, in tempo, in time, with each other, and they have to be able to play the song still without tracks. The band either sounds good or it doesn't, and there's nothing that tracks can do to fix that. You can mix them to make a good mix, but it's not going to change the fact that people are playing wrong notes all over the place, or the drummer can't keep time, or something like that. And that's the most important thing that you can do as the audio engineer, is just be prepared, be ready for anything, and hopefully everyone else is ready for anything as well if a problem arises. Let's talk about options that we have, the technical side of the equipment that we're using. We can group tracks together in a number of different ways, and we really do want to group things together to not have 5 people in the band on stage and then 30 instrument tracks that you also have to mix in. It's just too much. We can mix them down in Ableton. So let's say we have 3 guitar tracks. We can mix those 3 guitar tracks down to a single audio track. They go down a single channel in Dante, and then it comes through as one channel on our soundboard at the desk. But we lose a little bit of flexibility there. We lose a little bit of control. We lose the ability to balance those guitars with each other. So instead, let's say we don't mix them down, keep them separately, and then we send them down the same channel in Dante. So the result is that we still have 3 tracks in Ableton, but they're coming down the same channel in Dante. Like if you have 3 people who are going to an event, those 3 people can take 3 cars to go to the event, or they can all get in the same car and go to the event together. That's what we're doing here. We're grouping 3 individual tracks together in the same car, metaphorically speaking, on the same channel in Dante. And that groups them together to come to the soundboard as a single channel to work with as a group of tracks. So the important thing there is that you're set up for flexibility. You can still mix and balance in Ableton, but also there's simplicity that it's not 3 different tracks of guitars. It's just one channel of guitars as a group. So what kind of mixing do we do in Ableton? For me, it is just volume balancing levels of individual tracks in a group, and then we send them down Dante as a group. Um, that's the only mixing that I'll do in Ableton. I will balance the levels, I'll pan left and right. That's it. Then we group them together down a single Dante channel. But there's also mixing that we should be doing at the desk as well. And this is mixing with EQ, compression, and reverb. So essentially, we're treating the tracks as instruments that are coming from the stage. Like our guitar player, like our singer, like our drummer, we're treating all of the tracks as members of the band. We have to use EQ, compression, and reverb to mix them into the band. And we do that at the desk, at the soundboard. A lot of our instruments are direct in instruments. Our piano is a DI. Our electric guitars are all DI. Our acoustic guitar is DI. Our bass is DI. The synthesizer, the keys, it's all DI. So the only way that a bunch of DI instruments can sound cohesive together is if we mix them in reverb so that we have the sense that they are acoustic in some way. We do the same thing for tracks. We apply reverb, the same reverb, ideally. We apply the same reverb to all the instruments. So, we take all of our instruments in our band, we send them in an aux to a reverb, let's say a room reverb or a hall reverb. We also take all of our instrument tracks and we route them to that same reverb through that same aux, that auxiliary send. We do that so that the tracks blend in with the context of the band. It sounds like we have all these different instruments. They sound like they're in the same space together, that they're occupying the same space, that they're all acoustically happening in a room together. And that's just what music sounds like. Music doesn't sound like a DI box. Music sounds like people playing instruments in a room. And that's something that we have to deal with the tracks as well. So what is the goal of implementing tracks? You have to kind of decide that for yourself. As a musician, you have to decide, is there enough low end or is there too much low end? Is there enough texture or do we need more kind of harmonic content? Think about the roles of the instruments, and we'll talk about instrument roles in another video. Think about the roles of the instruments and think, is there something that I can do with these tracks to help fill those roles out a little bit better to make a better sounding result in the band? That could be your goal for the tracks. And that's not the only goal to have for tracks. Maybe if it's me at the soundboard, I would ideally leave the tracks completely out of the mix. I would send the tracks maybe to the band so that they can kind of be reminded that, oh yeah, this is how this part of the song goes, or something like that. For untrained musicians, you kind of need a little bit extra of a guide sometimes. But that might be the goal for my tracks this week, is just to use them as a guide for the band to help them remember that, oh yeah, this is this part of the song I play here on my instrument to this part of the song. And that's another way of I set my goals for what are these tracks doing for us in this service this Sunday.